Hey guys, welcome back. Pastor Zac and Pastor Mark coming at you again with another video. This week we're going to be talking about what the Proverbs have to say about the broad subject of money. So in your guys' lives right now, whether you're a high schooler or a junior higher, you are in a transition stage. And that's why the Proverbs are very helpful for us in general to look at, because you are in a stage where you are going from very little responsibility and control over your life, and you're transitioning now into adulthood, and you're at different stages even within that. But the point is that you're moving toward adulthood, and you're having to learn how to be responsible for yourself. And so as we look at the subject of money, it's not something that maybe all of you have a lot of. You probably don't have checks coming in every few weeks with thousands of dollars. At best, you may get $10 for your allowance, and maybe some of you do work or you babysit, so you have a little bit of income every once in a while. But your life is not supported by the money that you make yourself. You have to trust others. But you are getting money, and more as your life goes on, you will be making money, Lord willing, through hard work, whatever that may be. And so it's important for us to begin now setting in place some principles about how we use money in our lives. And this, like the rest of Proverbs, is sort of like learning how to drive a car. It's all these little things you're learning all right at once, and it feels maybe overwhelming, and you're trying to think through, okay, right foot, gas pedal, now on the brake, and I have the gears here and the steering wheel here, and you have all these things, and you have your mirrors, and you're trying to turn your blinker on. Eventually, after practice, after lots of time with practice, and maybe with a faithful guide, a parent helping you out, you can figure out how to drive smoothly. And so that's the hope of looking at the Proverbs. It may feel a little overwhelming, all these different areas of our lives where we can acquire wisdom, but hopefully as we walk and we begin to apply and practice all the things that we learn, it will become second nature to us. And so, as I said, what do the Proverbs teach us about money? What would a theology of money be from the book of Proverbs? So we have a few verses that Pastor Mark and I are going to look at with you, and we're going to spend a few minutes on each one just sort of talking about the basic intent and the meaning behind that verse. So the first one that we want to share is from Proverbs 3, verses 9 through 10. And this is what Solomon writes there. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. So the first part of that is what we really want to look at. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. So what does this mean? What can we learn from this passage? And I'll start with asking Mark.
Yeah, I like the key term there being first fruits. So one thing that Pastor Zac and I were talking about before we turned the recorder on here was that the very first issue in the world after the fall was this question of what we should offer to God. Cain and Abel understood this differently, and from reading the text of Genesis 4, you would learn that Abel offered the first fruits of his produce, and Cain just sort of offered a half-hearted offering, sacrifice to God. And so I don't think the point there is as much about evaluating exactly what the right percentage is to give to God, although it should be a generous sacrificial percentage. It's not that as much as it is offering something good to the Lord. Maybe a really quick story about offering first fruits. I may have told it in our church before as a sermon illustration that Pam and I was once doing an interim in Anchorage, Alaska, and we were going to arrive at our host's house at, I think it was 5:30. We were planning to get there, meet this host family that we were going to be staying with for 5 weeks in Alaska. And when you arrive at somebody's house at 5:30 and you're meeting somebody, you would expect dinner, right? And so we were expecting we're going to have a nice dinner with this family. We're going to enjoy some time over a meal, getting to know them. They'll be getting to know us. It'll be a wonderful time to get started with our 5 weeks. And so we got there at 5:30, and we actually had been given a key to their house, and so we actually were allowed to go in first and get set up a little bit, and then the family came home at about 5:45, and they come in carrying doggy bags. They had just gone out for dinner. They knew we were coming, and they had just been out for dinner, and here's what they did. They said, "Would you like our leftovers?" Right? And so that was what they offered us. And so this is an illustration of first fruits offering, right? And so we found ourselves in the position that God is often in, where people will, oh, whatever, I got $2 in my wallet, I guess I'll just give that today for the offering. It felt really crummy, really rotten. It was a bad way to start our relationship with this family, and actually things went really poorly during that 5 weeks there, because we just felt totally disregarded, not cared for. They didn't really, we could tell that they didn't want us in their house, right? And so that's what happens when we act that way towards God. Do we really want to be near the Lord?
Yeah.
Do we really want to show that we love Him? We'll do so by planning our finances in a way that shows God that we trust Him, that we love Him, that we'll offer our best offerings up to Him, just like we wish that family would have planned a great meal to get things started with us for 5 weeks.
Yeah. So right now it may not mean exactly giving 10% of your $10 that you get each week. Maybe that means you give $1 in the tithe offering every Sunday. But that may not be what it means.
But the heart.
The heart is still the point of this passage. Honor the Lord with what you do have in your first fruits. Give the best that you have. And so maybe you don't even have money on you. Maybe you're wondering, how can I honor the Lord with what I have in other ways? And so maybe it's not giving to God, specifically giving cash or what have you, but it may be your time, it may be of your resources, maybe sharing the good things that you have with others, inviting others into the joy that you have of sharing in whatever it may be. So one example is Evan Cisneros at Youth Group a few weeks ago brought his VR for everyone else to see it. Nobody needs a VR to live. It's sort of this, it's this extravagant pleasure to have a VR, but he got to share it with everyone else and didn't just want to have it for himself. And so what are ways we can bless others with what we have? One way that I've been blessed, that I was sharing with Mark, was back when I was a youth leader at an old church in Kingsburg. The youth leader team would go a few times during the year to the coast or to the mountains, and there was a man in town who had just bought a Polaris RZR, a 4-person off-roading vehicle. And it was really awesome. And so we'd get to take it for free for a weekend to the coast, to the dunes, or to the mountains to go off-roading. And it was this extravagant pleasure, but it was a way that he would bless others with what he had. So that was a good way or a good example, I think, of honoring the Lord with your wealth, using what you do have to be a blessing to others.
You have to be intentional, right? And like there was a time in my life when I was in seminary where Pam was working at Starbucks and I was a full-time student, and so it was Pam and I and my third year, Lydia, as well. And our monthly income, I think, was like $900, right? And so we were living off savings a lot, and so we didn't give very much to our church, even percentage-wise. We weren't able to give much to the church, but I was the youth leader, and they, before I had come, had a full-time youth person, and that person had left right before we arrived at that church, and I led the youth group for free, right? And so essentially I was saving the church $30,000, $40,000 a year because I was doing the work of probably more of a part-time youth leader. And so I was thinking, I don't have anything to give financially right now, but I have a lot of time to give. And that is very likely the case for students, that you can find something to intentionally offer to God, your first fruits of your time, when you don't have a lot of money to give, especially if you're a junior, senior, you can drive yourself around. Go and find something to do. Find something to contribute to the Lord. So we were able to do that, and it felt good in the end. It felt like we were giving, and we were participating in the life of the church and in what God's kingdom was sort of involved in that community.
Yeah, so that's a really good one. Give of your time, give of your whatever resources that you have available to you. So, moving along, we'll move to Proverbs 11:28. Proverbs 11:28 says, "Whoever trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like a green leaf." So this is a warning then to us to not trust in our riches, not to trust in the things that we have, or setting all the money aside, but to be righteous in the Lord, to be rich in goodness and good deeds unto God, and to be trusting God for his righteousness. Of course, that's what we talk about all the time, the righteousness of Christ that's given to us. And so this should be where our security and our hope, our eternity lies. Often in our culture, we do the exact opposite of this. We do trust our riches and our resources and our wealth. We trust our investments, our 401ks, our retirement plans. Whatever it may be, we trust having all of our money in our house so that one day when we're old, we can sell our house and have hundreds of thousands of dollars there. But something that you may have heard about just recently in our church was Randy Eskis, who had, last I heard, about $100,000 worth of tools stolen that he uses for his job in construction. And so here's a man who has lost so much and still is secure in the Lord, even though this is not just $100,000 of toys. This is $100,000 of tools of his livelihood, and there's still security and joy that can be found there. That is a perfect picture of what this principle is talking about.
Yeah, I think that happened on Thursday, and then on Sunday he was leading the song in worship, "My worth is not in what I own."
Right.
He was able to lead that song in worship and say to me before the service, I needed to be here. I needed to be leading this worship, to totally recenter myself on that truth. My worth is not in what I own. And so the world can take away what we own, but it can't take away his faith. It can't take away his trust in the Lord or his peace. So
yeah, wealth is a fleeting thing, and that is a painful picture of it. We also put our security in all sorts of other things. We could do a deep dive on that. But we often, as humans, put our security in our good looks, or in our characteristics, our traits, our personality. We find ways that we find meaning for ourselves. And so maybe we feel like we're not so good at other things, but hey, at least I'm rich, or hey, at least I have a really good personality that makes up for everything else. But our security, our trust, our joy should be in the Lord and in knowing the good news of the gospel, knowing what Christ has done, is doing, and will do for us. So that's a general look at that important proverb. The next one we'll look at is Proverbs 13:11, and Mark has this one.
Maybe a slight additional point to that one is you can see where people put their trust and their faith based on the kinds of people that they are obsessed with hanging out with. And so I know some people who will not be with poor people. They vacation. They do not want to see poor people on vacation. And they openly say that. I don't want to go where there are poor people. I don't want to see that. They brag about how wealthy their friends are a lot. And that is probably the most exciting thing, actually, that could happen for them, is that a very wealthy person would pay attention to them, or would be their friend, or they would have some story to tell about how awesome the vacation of their wealthy friend was, right? And they would be incapable of building a strong, loving relationship with somebody who is poor. And these people actually are not all that wealthy. They just love to be around wealthy people. And so you don't even have to be wealthy to fall into these traps.
Right.
But it's really their heart's desire to be with wealthy people and to feel important because of that. And, to brag about how wealthy their friends are. And it makes me kind of sad because I'll talk about the prison again in a second here. But when I go to the prison, those are deep friendships that I have with these men who are very poor, very just downtrodden in a number of ways. And I'll tell my friends in the prison, there's some sense in which I'd rather hang out with you guys and talk about God's word than hang out with very wealthy people and just talk about how amazing all the things they own and do are, right? That's just not all that interesting to me as a Christian. it can be cool to learn more about people's vacations that they take. And I like to take good vacations too, but and it's fun to talk about those and enjoy them. But there's this sort of edge that is crossed over often where it's like, wow, aren't they just the greatest? They've got millions of dollars. Isn't that a really great thing?
Yeah.
That's not all that great to me in and of itself. Now, if somebody has $1 million and uses it for God's kingdom, that's great. But I don't know. Can you hang out with people who don't have it all? Right?
Yeah.
Can you really have a close friendship with somebody? That's a good question that proverb really raises. Is not just about you having money and caring about it, but can you be with people who don't? Certainly Jesus did, and if you're a real Christian, you could be.
Yeah, that will come up here in a few verses too. So we'll
go
get
ahead.
to that.
You want to read that one then? We'll just go for it.
Proverbs 14:21.
Yeah.
Whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. So another part of how we use our money is regarding our generosity, right? Our money is not ours. That's a fundamental principle of how the Christian views money. It's God's money. He's given it to us. And so when we give to him, it shouldn't be a problem for us. It's his money. So we should be happy to give it to him, but also to give it to others, which is a way of giving it to him. Jesus says, whatever you do for the least of these, my brothers, you do also for me. That's Matthew 25. Jesus is talking about when you fed the person who was hungry, when you clothed the person who was without clothes, when you take in the stranger, you've done all of these things for me. And so the Christian knows that our money is given to us sort of on loan as a blessing to others. We should see our money as a means by which we can give, help, aid others, especially in difficult times like right now. So one example that comes to mind, this isn't to toot my own horn or anything, but I know my barber is not working right now. His shop is closed, and so I messaged him the other day and said, hey, here's my money. I paid him using Venmo, and so I wanted to say, hey, here's a blessing to you. I actually gave him a pretty decent tip as well, because I know that he's in need right now. He's not working, and that's not his fault, but that's the fault of what's going on. And so it was just a way of saying, hey, look, I don't need this money. I'm doing okay. My job hasn't been affected. My income is not being affected. I want to help you out and keep paying my part. And so that was one little tiny way for me to try to be a help to those who need it. But other good things would be, of course, to lend money to a friend who needs lunch money, or to someone who has a really good, serious need of your money. This also could just mean, yes, giving to somebody on the streets, although we often think it just means giving a few quarters to a homeless man. That can be a good thing to do, but it doesn't just mean that. We should be having a broader vision of what giving looks like.
I like the example of the barber, because I'll always say, and one thing I want to teach my kids and really our whole church is that money is a boomerang, is what I'll say. And it comes from God, it comes to us, and it goes out from us, right? We're at the center of that boomerang trajectory, you might say, right? And so if Zac sees money as this, then he can give to his barber and be generous. However, the prosperity gospel will say the boomerang starts with you, and you throw that money out and it comes back. Right? And so it's a totally confused theology of finances, because the source in the prosperity gospel that says, maybe for those who aren't as familiar, it says, you have a seed that you want to plant in God's kingdom, and then it will come back to you and you'll be wealthy.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
And so if you watch supposedly Christian TV, that you would see that all the time. It's not Christian, by the way, at all, when that's spoken of. And it's as if you have money, you put some in the church or you put some in the kingdom, and then you're going to get that back. You're maybe going to get it back tenfold or hundredfold, or whatever these prosperity gospel false preachers will say. And in that theology, the boomerang, you're the thrower of it, right? So it starts with you send it out, it comes back to you, and that's what you really want. But that's a bankrupt theology of money, in that Revelation says, from him and through him and to him are all things, right? From him, and through him good things come to us, and they return to him. So the Lord is the giver, and he'll be the recipient of, again, revelation, all blessing and honor and wisdom and riches and power, right? And so the reason I like the barber example is because Pastor Zac sees it as, this is from the Lord, I'm entrusted with it, and it goes out from me, and he doesn't have to do that expecting anything in return from this barber. And so it corrects the need to be compensated all the time for everything that we're doing. It can just say, no, just take it. It was the Lord's, it was given to me, and now it's yours, and I can give it.
And if you're wondering, that's why I'm wearing a hat. I still have not gotten a haircut, and that's okay.
Mine isn't so great either.
I just wanted to help my barber, who's become a friend of mine, and he's not a Christian, so it's been a cool way for me to help him and show them that I care for him in this time. But it's interesting that Mark mentions sort of the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel. That's another point that's helpful to make, is that the Bible says so much about money that it can often be hard to come up with the proper understanding of what it teaches. And some people read the Bible and they read the Mosaic covenant and the promises that if you do my will, there will be blessing for you. They may couple this with Malachi 3 and the storehouses of heaven being flung open. And they may look at Jesus saying, whatever you ask for in faith will be given to you. And so they think, if I'm a good person, if I do everything right, and God really loves me, that I will have lots of money. And if I do have lots of money, that must mean God is blessing me. I'm a good person, and I'm on my path to heaven here. But some people read the Bible and come away with a very different view of money, sort of a austere vision of money. That having money is bad. It's the root of all kinds of evil, as Paul says in Timothy. And Jesus was a homeless man. He had nowhere to lay his head at night. Homeless.
Probably had a house in Capernaum. But.
Yeah, nowhere does it say that Jesus was actually homeless, but they think of it as being like this. He was the traveling, itinerant evangelist, and so he was sort of just living on the income of others. The apostles, some of them did this as well, maybe, and so. Some people have this vision that if you have money, it's bad. We should avoid money. We should just, live on daily bread and our daily scraps, and that's what holiness is. But the Bible gives us, and I think Proverbs here, as we read through these verses, it's very clear that money is a good thing. Wealth can be a good thing. It's not to be an ultimate thing. It's not to be something we find our security in, and it's something that I think that boomerang principle is very helpful with. It shows us that money comes from God, comes to us, goes back to God. That's the first time I've ever heard that. I think that's really awesome. And so our money is it's here with us temporarily, and we can use it for eternal good if we are wise and think about it according to how God would want us to think about it.
It will be God's.
Yeah.
It will be. There's nothing that we can do to hold on to our money forever.
That's really
It
good.
will be used. It will be God's possession, right? And so why not entrust him with that? That doesn't mean, that can be totally warped into saying, two pastors who are talking about how the money will be God's is like saying that you can just give it to the Lord now by giving it to church. That's totally not what we're saying. But it will belong to the Lord, and you, as the old saying goes, you can't take it with you in the end. So
one more. Well, actually, we have two more verses we're going to try to get through.
All right.
So 13:11.
All right. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Dishonest money dwindles away, but he who gathers money little by little makes it grow." And a very short story about how I try to encourage the people around me to live by this principle is the things that I teach in the prison. And so when I go to the prison, maybe for those who don't really know me, who don't come to our church or are part of our youth group, every Wednesday, until recently when coronavirus started, every Wednesday I go with 3 people from our church into the prison, and we teach the scriptures along with a lot of life lessons just like this, right? And so we actually did a unit on finances, and one of the real struggles of the guys that I go and talk to is understanding this little by little, making it grow. Those who are strong in their faith can understand this. Those who come in with a very worldly perspective and understanding of money have a very hard time understanding this, because here's how it looks in their life. They say, Why would I work 45 hours a week in a job that hardly pays me anything when I can go and sell drugs on a street corner for an hour and make 10 grand, 15 grand in an hour, right? And so they'll say, why would I do that? Why would I bust my hump, to go and work at a hard job that I'm underpaid for when I could just do this so easily and feed my family, right? And put food on the table for my family. Well, first of all, it's wrong and sinful and it's destroying lives, right? But even if there was some sort of quick fix where you didn't have to work and it seemed like a good solution, like something like the lottery or gambling. Even if that seemed okay, it's still good for us to work, right?
Yeah.
It's still good for you. Maybe you don't have to work right now out of the home, very likely, but sooner or later it will be good for you to work. That was a blessing in the garden before the fall, that God gave Adam and Eve work to do.
It's part of what we were created for.
Absolutely, and it helps us to feel productive. It helps us to discover our gifts. It helps us build relationships. Like, if I didn't work, I wouldn't know any of you. I wouldn't know Pastor Zac. If he didn't work, he wouldn't know any of you. And that's where relationships are built. And I had a great job in high school where I worked at a sporting goods store and built relationships with a lot of non-believers, built relationships with some of the other believers who worked there. And I was really glad for that. It actually mattered more. Those relationships to me mattered more than the paycheck, the very small paycheck that I would bring home, about $150 a week or something like that, right? And so anyways, dishonest money, it doesn't really lead to anything productive or good in the end. But he who gathers money little by little, not only the money will grow, but your relationships grow, your trust in the Lord grows, and it's good for your heart to see things grow like that over time.
Yeah, and the long-term benefit is there as well. Whereas if you're gaining money through get-rich-quick schemes, you're not training yourself for long-term success and well-being. If you're always looking for the quick fix, you're not developing in yourself the skills of endurance, of strength, of putting up with people you may get frustrated with. That will serve you well as your life goes on. Because if you're selling drugs on the street corner, that may make you a lot of money very quickly, and it may work for several months, maybe a few years, but eventually you will probably get caught. You will have to be living with that constant anxiety of being scared that you're going to be found out or that someone may shoot you. It can be a dangerous profession, selling drugs. And so that won't suit you well or serve you well for the future, for 40 years down the line. You can't live like that forever. And so work is something that we do. We sort of should have a sort of tree with fruit mentality instead of a machine just producing things and being efficient and doing things as quickly as possible. We should have a sort of slow and plodding productivity, sort of work ethic as we approach our work.
Yeah, the way that I address it just really briefly with the guys in prison is just saying, the Lord made you to work. The Lord wants you to work, right? And that shatters the whole, but I could get this in an hour. No, the Lord wants you to work, to find what he made you to do, like discover your gifts, your spiritual gifts and your personality and all these things, and put them to work, right? And so it hopefully will shatter that mentality of, well, if I could just get this. And young people, you might be able to figure out if that's something that you're doing well or not well right now based on, are you thinking more about the work that the Lord is going to call you to do, or are you thinking more about how much money you'll have someday? Right? I think that's probably a good way to differentiate. I remember at one point sitting in college in a business class that I had to take, and I said, "Oh, if I make 60 grand, then I'm gonna have it all. I'm gonna make 60 grand when I get out of school. I'm gonna make 80 grand when I get out of school. What if I made 100 grand? I'm gonna figure out all the things that I could buy." And that's the opposite of this, right? Whereas young people, you need to be thinking about work, right? What work is God calling me to do? And pray that work will match up with an income that will provide for your needs, right? Focus on work more than on the money that you could get from it, I think.
Yeah, money is sort of an added benefit.
Yeah.
And you need it. We need money to live. That's true. But work is also something that is crucial to our surviving, and we're seeing this now. People's well-being. Okay, so we're not so sure where that just stopped off. So we're going to just quickly wrap things up with one more verse from Proverbs 30:7 through 9. I think this is sort of the fundamental verse that we can take with us about what Proverbs teaches. And so here's what the son of Agur says. Actually, it's Agur himself in Proverbs 30. He writes this: 2 things I ask of you, deny them not to me before I die. So this is his prayer to God. Don't deny these 2 things from me. He says, remove far from me falsehood and lying. So don't let me be a liar, and don't let others who lie don't let them impact my life. But also, give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that it is needful for me. So don't give me poverty, but don't give me riches. And he gives reasons for these 2 things right here. Lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? So if he has riches, he may be full and think, who is God? I don't need God. I'm self-sufficient on my own. Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of God. And so we looked at this last week with envy, when we're in desperate situations where we feel like we're impoverished and we need something so badly we're willing to do whatever it would take. This would cause God's name to be profaned. And so his humble prayer is for a life of simplicity, a life of just having enough, not trying to be an extravagantly rich man, but also knowing that his limitations and not wanting to be poor that would offer in new temptations or would place new temptations in his life. He wants to have sort of that middle of the road. He wants to have enough money to get by, but not more than he needs. And I think that this is something we can learn from in our culture. It helps us to have that balanced approach to money, where money is not inherent godliness, and it's also not godly to not have money. It's okay to have money, and we should sort of seek that middle road. And so I hope that this has been a helpful video. If there's anything else you want to add to this, feel free.
Yeah, that's a great way to conclude. I think the biblical world, money as an idea was not developed nearly as much as it is today, where we can look at a number at the bottom of our bank account and feel our worth is attached to it. Even as a pastor, I can do that a lot at times. How did the retirement grow today? Oh, it went down today. Oh, I don't feel quite as good. Or the other way, the stock market's up a little bit, mutual fund went up, and that can bring us on a roller coaster of emotions, basically. And that's obviously not biblical. Give me neither poverty nor riches is the reminder of Proverbs there, and it's a good corrective. We need the corrective all the time, and so show this to your parents, right? And encourage money conversations. I think that sometimes in our culture, money is a bit shameful. To talk about money is verboten, as the German would say. It's like there's something we don't do. We don't talk about money. Don't ask Dad about money. And that's not biblical at all. Obviously, we easily found all these Proverbs, and there are many other places in the Bible that talk openly about money, how to use it for God's glory, because like I said earlier, it is from Him, so it's a blessing. It is for His glory and for His kingdom, and we are blessed to be in the middle of that chain, of that process. Blessed to receive it, and blessed to give and be a blessing to other people through it.
Yeah. So money reveals where your heart is at. How we approach money reveals our posture towards God, whether that's a hardened posture or a softened posture. So we know that this has been a long video. Thank you for sticking it out and watching this whole thing. If you've gotten this far, hats off to you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys at Youth Group.
Right,
Take care.
See you guys.